You clicked on this video to finally understand the real history of Fazbear Entertainment. Every restaurant, every cover-up, every disappearance, and every corporate reboot across more than 40 years of chaos. And you're in the right place, because this isn't a simple recap of the games. This is the full timeline the series only hints at. What most fans don't realize is that the story doesn't start with Freddy, or the 87-byte, or even the missing children incident. It starts much earlier, with 2 men, 1 diner, and a technology that was doomed from the moment it was created. Once you see where it begins, the entire Five Nights at Freddy's storyline makes a lot more sense. So get comfortable. Whether you're using this to sleep, study, or just have something calm in the background, there won't be any loud noises. Just steady, detailed lore. And if you enjoy storytelling, feel free to subscribe. It helps me keep making these for you. Part 1. The birth of an idea, Fredbear's original concept, the very bedrock of the entire Five Nights at Freddy's narrative, a universe defined by technological horror and profound tragedy, is surprisingly mundane and hopeful. A small, creative business venture intended to bring joy to children. This initial, innocent concept originated in the bright, morally upright mind of Henry Emily, the visionary engineer and dedicated father, whose personal dream would soon be twisted into a nightmarish empire of violence and corporate denial. Henry envisioned a safe, brightly lit haven, a place distinct from typical noisy arcade halls, where children could sit, eat good food, listen to catchy music, and crucially, interact with lifelike, whimsical animatronic characters. His focus was always on the wholesome experience, the emotional connection, and the seamless integration of robotics into family entertainment, viewing the technology as a means to achieve genuine happiness and wonder for his young patrons. This original concept was driven by a purity of intent that the resulting corporation would spend decades systematically destroying. To bring this expensive and technologically ambitious vision to life, Henry required 2 things: substantial capital and a fellow engineering genius to handle the complex mechanical execution. This is where William Afton entered the picture, forming the other, darker half of the defining partnership. William was an engineer of considerable skill, bringing with him the necessary financial backing and the technical ability to manufacture Henry's intricate designs. However, the foundational documents and early communications between the 2 men reveal a subtle but immediate divergence in philosophy. While Henry was absorbed in the characters' songs, their stage presence, and the children's laughter, William showed a chilling, almost detached fascination with the raw mechanics of the animatronics. He was preoccupied with the internal chassis, the programming logic, the hydraulic functionality, and the secrets of their seamless movement, often prioritizing complex, innovative engineering over the simple goal of entertainment. This early distinction, Henry focusing on the product's heart and William focusing on the product's control, was the most critical ideological split that allowed the partnership to initially flourish, but ultimately guaranteed its fatal collapse. The primary innovation that defined this era, and which served as the intellectual foundation for the entire Fazbear brand, was the design of the initial prototype mascots. Henry wanted versatile entertainers, and William delivered with a revolutionary yet terrifyingly flawed mechanical system. The concept was simple: create 2 signature mascots that could perform on stage autonomously, yet could also be worn by employees for close customer interaction during the day. This necessity for dual functionality drove William's engineering work toward a high-risk solution that prioritized mechanical efficiency over human safety. The resulting suits, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, were therefore not just characters. They were groundbreaking experimental technology that represented both the pinnacle of Henry's dream and the lethal core of William's detached engineering genius, containing the seeds of the entire franchise's liability issues. This ambitious partnership and the subsequent development of the prototype suits created the brief, fleeting period of corporate innocence that marks the very beginning of the timeline. The original diner, Fredbear's Family Diner, was the physical manifestation of Henry's joyful idea, a place where the novelty of the animatronics captivated the local community. The immediate success demonstrated the undeniable brilliance of Henry's creative vision, proving that the concept of interactive robot-driven entertainment was commercially viable and deeply appealing to the 1980s family demographic. Yet, even as the walls were being painted and the dining tables were being set, William Afton was already developing the experimental high-risk systems that would soon turn the restaurant into a site of profound tragedy, confirming that his interests in robotics extended far beyond mere profit and into the darker realms of mechanical control and human vulnerability. The initial concepts laid out by Henry were purely wholesome, focusing on creating a safe and memorable experience for every child who walked through the door. This moral purity, however, was fundamentally incompatible with William's detached, amoral engineering ethos, which viewed complexity and control as the highest goals, even if they came at the cost of inherent risk. The tragic irony is that the creation of the Fazbear Empire, the greatest ongoing threat in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, required the harmonious fusion of Henry's creative heart and William's dark mind, leading to a product that was both incredibly popular and fundamentally lethal from the moment the first spring lock mechanism was installed in the initial mascot prototypes. The birth of the idea, therefore, was simultaneously the birth of the greatest disaster the entertainment world had ever seen. Part 2. Henry and Afton's partnership, hope, innovation, and early tension. The co-founding of the entertainment brand, centered around the innovative dual-purpose animatronics, created a partnership between Henry, Emily, and William Afton that was, on paper, destined for commercial success. It was a union of complementary extremes. Henry supplied the emotional heart of the brand. The creative vision focused on delighting children and ensuring the experience was inherently joyful, while William supplied the cold, calculating mind, mastering the intricate engineering that made the groundbreaking technology possible. This dynamic was initially incredibly productive, pushing the boundaries of what robot characters could achieve. Yet beneath the surface of shared innovation, this profound divergence in core values quietly sowed the seeds of a destructive, decades-long rivalry and eventual tragedy. Henry's focus on the purity of the vision was absolute. He saw the animatronics as performers, guardians, and vessels of joy, dedicating his skills to creating compelling music and ensuring the characters possessed a certain warmth that resonated with the family atmosphere. His motivations were simple and clear. He was a loving father, a devoted husband, and a committed partner who genuinely desired to see his work result in innocent happiness. This moral clarity extended to his personal life, which was characterized by a stable, loving family unit, a fact that, unknowingly to Henry, became a corrosive source of jealousy and resentment for William Afton. William, a man whose own home life was rapidly deteriorating and whose psychological state was becoming increasingly detached and unstable, began to view Henry's perceived happiness and moral certainty as an affront, an undeserved privilege that highlighted the growing emptiness in his own life. William's genius, meanwhile, was entirely fixated on the mechanics of control. While Henry crafted the musical scores, William was perfecting the internal mechanisms, particularly the revolutionary but terrifying spring-lock technology. The complexity of these systems, which allowed a single costume to transform from a functioning automaton to a wearable suit and back again, was a marvel of engineering that required an obsessive attention to detail. This obsessive focus, however, extended beyond mere robotics. William became increasingly intrigued by the potential for hidden functionality, safe rooms, secret access points, and mechanisms that allowed the animatronics' movements and presence to be manipulated in ways the public, and even Henry, could not perceive. This technical amoralism meant that while Henry was building joy, William was secretly building the framework for manipulation and eventual violence, ensuring the technology could serve his darker, unseen interests. The early tension between the partners was subtle, manifesting as philosophical disagreements over risk assessment and cost. Henry, concerned with the inherent danger of the spring-lock technology, may have pushed for greater safety protocols or the eventual phasing out of the dual-use suits. William, conversely, would have argued fiercely for the technology's continued use, prioritizing its innovative efficiency and the control it afforded him, likely dismissing safety concerns as exaggerated or overly expensive. This continuous corporate negotiation, pitting Henry's concern for human safety against William's obsession with mechanical perfection, demonstrated the fundamental incompatibility of their relationship. Henry remained blinded by his trust and his own moral certainty, entirely unaware of William's developing psychological instability and his rapidly growing fascination with the power of life and death, an interest that transcended the animatronics and focused squarely on human vulnerability. The true tragedy of the partnership lies in the profound difference between the two men's internal worlds. Henry was building a legacy of warmth and invention, driven by an open, loving existence. William, driven by a hidden, consuming darkness, was using his engineering brilliance to create the tools of his coming crimes, viewing the technology and the business itself not as a means of entertainment, but as a sophisticated cover and weapon. This early divergence, masked by the shared success of the original diner, ensured that the hope and innovation that birthed the brand were inextricably linked to a creeping, systemic evil, setting the partnership on a guaranteed path toward destruction, forever connecting the image of the playful animatronic to the cold reality of a hidden, murderous mechanism. Part 3. The first animatronics, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. The definitive feature that set the original restaurant apart and laid the technological groundwork for every subsequent horror in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe was the invention of the spring-lock technology, which gave birth to the franchise's two foundational mascots, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. These two golden characters were not merely prototypes. They were a revolutionary leap in interactive entertainment, representing the pinnacle of William Afton's engineering genius and the physical embodiment of the mortal danger that lurked beneath the shiny facade of Fazbear Entertainment. The sheer ambition behind these creations ensured that they would forever be remembered as the source of immense corporate liability and the terrifying prison for the company's murderous co-founder. The core principle of the spring-lock system was dual-purpose functionality, a mechanical concept designed to maximize the utility and presence of the main characters. By day, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie operated as traditional animatronics, performing music and entertaining children on the stage. Their movements were complex, and their design allowed for a high degree of audience interaction, contributing significantly to the success of Fredbear's Family Diner. However, they were also built to serve as wearable costumes. Through a complicated process involving a manual hand crank, an employee could compress the internal robotic endoskeleton pieces flat against the inner walls of the suit. This compression was maintained by a series of highly sensitive spring-operated locks, theoretically clearing enough space for a human to step inside and wear the costume for floor interaction during special events or photo opportunities. The technology was brilliant in its conception, but devastatingly flawed and temperamental in its execution. The internal spring locks that held the compressed endoskeleton were extremely susceptible to external environmental factors. Corporate memos and training manuals later obtained from the ruins of Fazbear Entertainment detailed the specific dangers, confirming that even the smallest amount of moisture, high humidity, a sudden sharp jolt of movement, or even the moisture from an employee's breath could cause the mechanisms to instantly fail. When these locks failed, the sharp, heavy pieces of the endoskeleton would violently snap back into place within the suit, shearing through the wearer's body with brutal, crushing force, resulting in a gruesome, instantaneous death or catastrophic injury. This inherent structural danger transformed these two iconic, playful characters into literal ticking time bombs. They represented a corporate commitment to maximizing profit through a high-risk, single-chassis solution, utterly disregarding the extreme danger posed to any employee who dared to wear the suits. The existence of these suits necessitated the construction of dedicated hidden safe rooms in the early locations, rooms that were electronically invisible to the animatronics programming and were intended for the emergency storage and repair of the springlock suits, preventing a catastrophic failure on the main dining floor. The ultimate significance of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie lies not just in their danger, but in their eventual fate as the spiritual prisons of the two co-founders' children, and ultimately William Afton himself. The golden coloration, the dual-use mandate, and the mechanical fragility made them unique anchors in the lore. They were the original instruments of the brand's success, the physical manifestations of the corporate liability, and the ultimate mechanism of William Afton's self-inflicted cosmic justice. The fact that the entire horror began with these two versatile, iconic characters underscores the central theme of the franchise, that the greatest darkness is often hidden just beneath the most welcoming, colorful, and technologically advanced surface. Part 4. Fredbear's Family Diner, the first location. The physical location that housed the inaugural era of the burgeoning entertainment empire was Fredbear's Family Diner, a modest, small-town establishment that represented the apex of Henry Emily's hopeful vision before the influence of William Afton and the failures of the springlock technology irrevocably corrupted the brand. This diner, believed to be situated somewhere in Utah during the early 1980s, was the birthplace of the entire franchise, a place that quickly became a beloved local phenomenon due to the novelty and charm of its two principal performers. The diner itself was structurally simple and unpretentious, reflecting its origins as a small, locally focused business venture. We see glimpses of its layout and atmosphere primarily through the distorted, terrifying memories featured in the minigames of Five Nights at Freddy's 4. It featured a main stage area where Fredbear and Spring Bonnie performed their shows, a standard dining area filled with tables for birthday parties, and an arcade zone. Crucially, The location was also built with the highly secretive safe room, a hidden, non-mapped space intended for the use and storage of the dangerous spring-lock suits, a feature necessitated by William Afton's insistence on the dual-purpose technology and the need to mitigate the immense liability they represented. This secret room, physically and electronically concealed, would later become the site of some of the franchise's most devastating tragedies. The immediate success of Fredbear's Family Diner was explosive, largely driven by the sheer novelty and advanced robotics of the golden mascots. For the local community, it was a clean, engaging alternative for family outings, a place where the technology felt revolutionary and inviting. The diner's positive reception proved Henry Emily's core concept, that children would respond enthusiastically to interactive animatronic characters designed with warmth and personality. The popularity of this single location was the undeniable commercial engine that spurred the co-founders to think bigger, moving from a local Utah sensation to a venture with national scalable ambitions. The operation within the diner was, at this stage, still characterized by a relative corporate innocence. While internal memos might have discussed the dangers of the spring-lock suits, the first flickering reports of near misses and employee injuries that began to stack up. The public facade was one of perfect, uninterrupted family fun. The staff were focused on table service, managing the small arcade, and ensuring the smooth operation of the temperamental golden mascots. This era was the brief, calm period before the profound moral collapse that followed William Afton's turn to serial murder and the subsequent possession of the animatronics by the souls of the children he had murdered. The decision to expand and incorporate, leading to the formation of Fazbear Entertainment, was a direct result of the diner's local triumph. The co-founders recognized that their concept was scalable, their technology was marketable, and their brand had the potential to dominate the niche of robot-driven entertainment. This transition from Fredbear's Family Diner to the larger corporate structure of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza marked the final, crucial step away from Henry's small-town dream and into William's arena of large-scale business operation. The diner, in its simplicity and success, represented the last moment where the Fazbear brand was associated purely with joy and innovation, its existence a testament to the powerful potential that William Afton's personal wickedness and the company's subsequent negligence would tragically undermine for the next 40 years, forever turning a golden opportunity into a horrifying urban legend. Part 5. Early accidents, first liability reports, and the systemic negligence. The period immediately following the successful launch of Fredbear's Family Diner was marked by a chilling, inevitable reality. The spring-lock technology was an engineering disaster waiting to happen. William Afton's brilliance had come at the expense of human safety, and corporate documents from this era confirmed that Fazbear Entertainment was aware of the severe, potentially lethal risks associated with the dual-purpose suits long before the first recorded murder. This critical period, characterized by early accidents and internal liability reports, established the company's defining tragic pattern of systemic negligence and corporate cover-up that would persist throughout its entire history. Internal memos and warnings, later revealed through the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, painted a clear picture of the inherent, non-negotiable danger of the spring-lock suits. These documents were not simple safety reminders. They were urgent warnings necessitated by actual incidents involving staff members using the suits. The memos emphasized the extreme vulnerability of the internal mechanisms to moisture, humidity, and rapid movements, conditions that are almost impossible to entirely eliminate in a busy, hot, an often chaotic environment like a children's restaurant. Staff were repeatedly instructed on complex, time-consuming protocols required for safe usage and storage. Protocols that were clearly being ignored or failed in the field, leading to near-fatal accidents. These early incidents, while likely not resulting in immediate publicized fatalities, were severe enough to generate internal liability reports that exposed the ticking time bomb at the core of the company's operation. The report served as irrefutable evidence that Fazbear Entertainment was fully aware of the technology's devastating potential. The decision to continue utilizing the springlock suits, rather than immediately decommissioning them or redesigning the concept into a safer, single-purpose animatronic, was the first profound example of corporate negligence. The company prioritized the marketing value of the dual-use functionality and the cost savings of not designing separate character costumes over the clear existential risk to its employees, effectively establishing a dangerous precedent that financial considerations trumped human safety every single time. The continuous cycle of accidents led the company to implement the strict safe room protocols, attempting to manage the immense liability the suits represented. These rooms, designed to be off-limits to customers and electronically invisible to the animatronics programming, were intended to be secure zones for the transition between suit and animatronic modes. The fact that the company had to build hidden high-security chambers for its most popular characters is a stark illustration of the structural danger of the technology. These protocols were an act of corporate desperation, an attempt to contain the problem rather than solve it, allowing the company to maintain the public illusion of perfect safety, while privately acknowledging the lethal nature of the golden mascots. This early period of liability reports and cover-ups is perhaps the most damning evidence against Fazbear Entertainment as a corporate entity. It proves that the company was not an innocent victim of William Afton's crimes, but a willing enabler that consistently placed its own financial stability and brand image above the moral responsibility to protect its staff and patrons. The initial accidents involving the springlocks were the first drops of blood on the corporate ledger, setting the stage for the massive, catastrophic tragedies that would follow. The corporate culture of denial and secrecy was forged here, in the cold memos detailing the dangers of the suits, providing the legal and operational framework for the systematic cover-ups that would define the Fazbear brand for the next 4 decades. Part 6. The Puppet, Charlotte, and the First Major Tragedy. The transition from corporate negligence to profound supernatural horror was violently realized with the first deliberate personal act of murder by William Afton, the death of Charlotte Emily, the beloved young daughter of his partner Henry. This tragedy, which likely occurred sometime before the infamous MCI, or missing children incident, around 1982 or 1983, was the founding act of supernatural possession in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, marking the moment the Fazbear brand became irrevocably tainted by genuine malice and grief. The murder of Charlotte, often simply referred to as Charlie, was driven by William Afton's deep-seated resentment and jealousy toward Henry's perceived pure happiness and stable family life, a bitterness that had been quietly festering beneath the surface of their successful partnership. The details of the crime are revealed through the heartbreaking imagery of the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night minigames. William, driven by a desire to inflict maximum pain upon Henry, locked Charlotte outside one of the early pizzeria locations on a rainy evening. Exposed to the elements and vulnerable, she was murdered by William in a secluded back alley adjacent to the restaurant. The crime was quick, brutal, and targeted, designed specifically to destroy the one thing Henry valued above all else: Unbeknownst to William, Henry had designed a specific mechanism to protect his daughter, the security puppet. This unique, lanky animatronic was originally built by Henry to watch over Charlotte, programmed with a protective directive to monitor her movements and ensure her safety within the establishment. However, on the night of the murder, the puppet's programming and mobility were violently hampered. The rainy environment, combined with the extreme vulnerability of the puppet's internal systems to moisture, a cruel irony given William's own engineering in the spring locks, caused the animatronic to malfunction severely. Furthermore, a parked vehicle, possibly William's own, blocked the puppet's immediate path to the back alley, delaying its arrival at the scene of the crime. By the time the damaged security puppet managed to drag itself out of the facility and locate the alley, it was too late. It found Charlotte's lifeless body lying in the pouring rain. In a defining, pivotal moment of the franchise's lore, the puppet collapsed directly over her corpse. It is heavily implied, if not confirmed, that the internal mechanisms and possibly a lingering viral or ethereal essence of the animatronic fused with the child's body, capturing her soul in the moment of death. The intense grief, the violent trauma, and the proximity to the animatronic's advanced but water-damaged endoskeleton combined to create the first possessed robot in the Fazbear continuity. This event transformed the security puppet into the foundational spiritual entity known simply as the puppet. Charlotte's soul, trapped and fueled by profound grief and a protective instinct, immediately became the primary force for justice within the Fazbear universe. She was the first victim who refused to die, the first spirit who clung to the mechanical world, and the core consciousness that would later organize and motivate the other murdered children. Her defining mission, driven by her father's protective programming and her own lingering sense of duty, was to give gifts, give life. The pivotal action of stuffing the bodies of the subsequent murder victims into the animatronics, giving those children's spirits a mechanical home, and thus enabling the enduring paranormal haunting that would define every subsequent Fazbear location. The murder of Charlotte was the essential tragic ingredient that permanently turned the hopeful dream of Fredbear's family diner into a house of supernatural horrors. Part 7. The founding of Fazbear Entertainment, the success of the original Fredbear's family diner, despite the internal anxieties caused by the Springlock failures and the horrific murder of Henry's daughter, provided the necessary commercial momentum for the partners to formally incorporate and expand their business interests. The establishment of Fazbear Entertainment, Inc. marked the definitive shift from a small, local entrepreneurial venture to a large, ambitious corporate entity with national standardized operations. This foundational step was purely a business exercise, a move designed to secure larger investor capital and to formalize the legal, structural framework that would, ironically, later be weaponized to cover up the company's continuous, escalating tragedies. The decision to incorporate was driven by the scalability of the animatronic concept and the undeniable public appetite for robot-driven entertainment. Henry and William recognized that the market demanded expansion, necessitating a formalized corporate structure to handle the logistics of branding, manufacturing, distribution, and large-scale real estate acquisition. Fazbear Entertainment, Inc. was created to facilitate this growth, immediately bringing in external investors who saw the potential for immense profit in the new entertainment niche. This influx of capital and external authority instantly changed the operational dynamic, transitioning the company from a partnership between two engineers into a complex, multifaceted corporation with a board of directors and a focus on maximizing shareholder return. The corporate restructuring led to the creation of standardized procedures, employee manuals, and, most critically, a dedicated legal and public relations department. This was the moment the company gained the institutional apparatus necessary for the sophisticated cover-ups that would define its operational history. While the original diner could handle small-scale accidents locally, a major national brand required a robust mechanism to manage crises. The legal teams were established to protect the company's assets from the known liability of the spring-lock technology and the inevitable employee accidents, a foreshadowing of the massive lawsuits and settlements that would plague them in the years to come. The PR department was designed to control the public narrative, ensuring that the brand remained synonymous with family fun, even as the internal reality became increasingly dark. This corporate evolution was accompanied by the first major rebranding effort, shifting the focus away from the golden prototypes of Fredbear's family diner toward the more recognizable, standardized cast: Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. This transition to the Freddy Fazbear's pizza name and aesthetic represented the company's full ambition to become the dominant national brand in its space, leveraging professional marketing and a standardized, easily replicable restaurant design. The move was an attempt to look forward, but the corporate DNA remained corrupted by the secret dangers of the original technology and the profound, unaddressed trauma of Charlotte's murder. The founding of Fazbear Entertainment was the necessary strategic move that allowed the tragedy of the MCI, or Missing Children Incident, to become a widespread international scandal instead of a localized police investigation. It created the corporate machinery of denial, the legal teams, the PR strategies, the non-disclosure agreements that allowed the business to survive the catastrophic events orchestrated by its co-founder. The structure was now ready for its first massive location, its first standardized cast of animatronics, and the inevitable, systematic violence that William Afton was preparing to unleash upon the brand, confirming that the foundation of the empire was built upon the ruthless exploitation of both children's joy and corporate law. Part 8. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the first pizzeria era. The grand opening of the first dedicated Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location marked the beginning of Fazbear Entertainment's full commitment to national brand dominance, a decisive step away from the small-scale, localized operation of Fredbear's family diner. This new era represented a massive corporate investment into standardization, marketing, and expansion, fundamentally changing the nature of the business and the types of animatronics featured. This location, which likely operated successfully for a period before the catastrophic events of the MCI, or Missing Children Incident, around 1985, demonstrated the company's ambitious shift toward a scalable, replicable entertainment model. But it simultaneously solidified the company's dangerous disregard for the lingering hazards of their experimental past. This phase of the company's development saw the official introduction of the classic, iconic cast of characters: Freddy Fazbear, the brown bear and brand namesake, Bonnie the bunny, Chica the chicken, and the fan favorite, Foxy the pirate fox, who occupied his own dedicated performance area, Pirate Cove. The design of these animatronics was a subtle retreat from the dangerous complexity of the spring-lock technology for daily performances. Unlike the dual-purpose golden suits, these were primarily built as single-purpose automatons, intended to remain fixed on stage or limited to a predefined range of movement during operational hours. This modification was likely a financial and legal necessity. an attempt to reduce the extreme liability incurred by the continuous spring lock accidents detailed in the earlier internal reports, but it failed to address the systemic issue of animatronic safety outside of performance times. The aesthetic of the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was pure 1980s commercial enthusiasm. It was a larger, more elaborate space than the original diner, fully equipped with a robust arcade floor, multiple dining rooms dedicated to birthday celebrations, and a central stage system capable of hosting coordinated musical performances by the main band. The company invested heavily in establishing a distinct brand identity, focusing on catchy music, memorable character designs, and the classic pizzeria atmosphere that aimed to maximize both customer retention and merchandise sales. This push for standardization and brand recognition was a typical move for a corporation aiming for franchise scale, ensuring that the same experience could be replicated efficiently in multiple markets, thereby maximizing investor return and minimizing operational variation. However, beneath the shiny corporate exterior, the shadow of William Afton and the puppet, possessed by the soul of Henry's murdered daughter Charlotte, remained active and destructive. While the main four animatronics were new, the facility itself likely contained remnants of the older era, including the hidden safe room for the storage of the retired, yet still dangerous, golden spring-lock suits. This continued preservation of the lethal technology, even as the brand modernized, was a direct consequence of the company's inability or unwillingness to fully write off its initial research and development costs. The decision to maintain the secret, unmapped safe room was particularly critical, as it gave William Afton the perfect, untraceable sanctuary for the commission of his most devastating, defining crime, the missing children incident. The first pizzeria era was thus a brief, financially successful, yet deeply cursed period for Fazbear Entertainment. It was an era defined by corporate ambition and branding, where the focus shifted from a small, local dream to a national corporate strategy. Yet, this expansion simultaneously amplified the consequences of the company's existing negligence. By increasing the size of their operations and the volume of children visiting their restaurants, they created a larger, more fertile ground for William Afton's hidden wickedness and the paranormal activity already set in motion by the presence of the puppet. The success of the brand only served to mask the creeping systemic evil that was about to erupt into a full-blown public health and criminal disaster. Part 9. The Missing Children Incident. Company-wide panic. The relative success and outward normalcy of the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location were utterly shattered in June 1985 by the catastrophic event known as the MCI, or Missing Children Incident, which forever transformed the nature of the Fazbear haunting and initiated a continuous cycle of corporate panic and cover-up. This was not a mechanical failure or an accidental injury. This was a deliberate criminal act of serial murder, orchestrated by the company's own co-founder, William Afton. A crime that immediately placed the entire corporation into a state of irreversible crisis. The incident involved the disappearance of 5 innocent children during a busy day at the restaurant. The details, later pieced together through cryptic newspaper clippings and hidden minigames, confirmed that William Afton was the perpetrator, exploiting the very technology he helped create. Afton disguised himself in the retired, but still fully functional, Spring Bonnie spring-lock suit, leveraging its dual-use nature to appear familiar and harmless to the children. He lured them away from the main dining area and into the hidden, unmapped safe room, the same room intended for the secure storage of the lethal suits. Once inside the concealed room, Afton brutally murdered the 5 children, a shocking act of violence driven by his escalating psychological instability and hatred, possibly targeting Henry's friends or acquaintances to inflict further pain on his former partner. The immediate aftermath was one of intense, company-wide panic. The disappearance of 5 children from a high-profile family restaurant became front-page news, instantly drawing the attention of local police and the health department. The severity of the scandal went far beyond any previous Springlock accident, threatening the very viability of the nascent national brand. The company's primary focus immediately shifted from customer service to crisis management. The supernatural aspect of the MCI, which the company was entirely oblivious to, began shortly after the murders. The puppet, animated by the protective soul of Henry's daughter Charlotte, intervened. It found the bodies of the murdered children and, in an act of profound protective grief, stuffed their corpses inside the main 4 animatronics: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. This action effectively bound the souls of the 5 children to the primary animatronic cast, transforming the relatively benign machines into the possessed, vengeful entities that would haunt every subsequent restaurant, forever tying the smell, the malfunction, and the aggressive night behavior to the tragedy of 1985. The combination of the police investigation and the growing supernatural contamination caused immediate, severe operational problems. Customers reported a strong, persistent odor emanating from the main animatronics, complaints that necessitated the intervention of the health department. Reports of bodily fluids near the suits further escalated the crisis. The animatronics themselves began exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior at night, a consequence of the vengeful souls trapped within. This culminated in the restaurant's inevitable shutdown. The missing children incident was the turning point that corrupted the brand's image, forcing the company to pivot from ambitious expansion to desperate, continuous cover-up and denial. Part 10. Cover-ups, payouts, and reopening under new management. The catastrophic consequences of the MCI, or missing children incident, in 1985, activated the full machinery of corporate denial within Fazbear Entertainment. The company's response was not one of remorse or accountability, but of ruthless, systematic obfuscation, leveraging its legal and public relations infrastructure to bury the scandal and protect its assets. This period solidified the company's identity as a corrupt entity, willing to commit vast resources to the suppression of the truth, establishing the protracted cycle of cover-up and rebranding that would define its operational history. The legal team immediately took aggressive action, focusing on 2 primary, critical objectives: controlling the narrative and neutralizing legal liability. The public narrative was carefully crafted to admit only that children had gone missing, and that the restaurant was the scene of a tragedy, while fervently denying any corporate culpability in the murders or any connection between the disappearance and the animatronics themselves. Newspaper clippings later recovered hint at the success of this strategy, suggesting that while a suspect, William Afton, though his identity as the co-founder was concealed, was initially apprehended, the bodies were never officially recovered or linked to the restaurant in the final police reports. This critical ambiguity allowed the company to avoid criminal charges related to the disposal of bodies, insulating them from the worst of the fallout. To neutralize the immediate legal threat posed by the families of the victims, the company initiated a round of massive financial payouts and legal settlements. These settlements were issued with stringent ironclad non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, attached, effectively buying the silence of the grieving families and preventing them from publicly discussing the horrific details of the tragedy or the company's alleged negligence. This use of hush money was a defining feature of Fazbear's legal strategy, ensuring that the terrible truth remained confined to legal filings and internal memos, inaccessible to the broader public and future law enforcement. The goal was to transform the MCI from a corporate failure into a tragic but sealed historical footnote. The most visible result of this crisis management was the closure of the original 1985 pizzeria and the subsequent rebranding campaign. The company could not afford to allow the stench, the negative press, and the paranormal activity to continue under the existing banner. The location was shut down, but the Fazbear Entertainment entity itself survived. It eventually reopened under the guise of new management, a calculated PR move designed to create the illusion that the new operations were completely divorced from the management and corporate policies of the scandal-plagued 1985 location. This corporate amnesia, the practice of simply erasing a location's history and restarting with a fresh coat of paint, became the standard operating procedure for the entire franchise. The period following the MCI was a masterclass in corporate survival through ethical bankruptcy. The company demonstrated that its core function was no longer to entertain children, but to perpetually cover its tracks, prioritizing the financial survival of the brand over any moral obligation to the victims, their families, or the truth. This established the deep, cynical foundation of corporate malice that would persist for decades, ensuring that every subsequent location, every new animatronic, and every new tragedy would be met with the same cold, calculated response of denial and aggressive legal maneuvering. Part 11. The Toy Era, Rebranding and Facial Recognition. The Toy Era, featured prominently in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, represents Fazbear Entertainment's most audacious and technologically ambitious effort to shed the stigma of the MCI, or missing children incident, and the previous round of accidents. Driven by a relentless need to demonstrate a commitment to safety and modernity, the company invested heavily in a complete rebranding and technological overhaul, resulting in a new line of animatronics that were aesthetically cleaner, functionally more complex, and ultimately even more susceptible to William Afton's hidden manipulation. The new line of characters, including Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, Mangle, and Balloon Boy, were designed with a glossy plastic aesthetic that stood in stark contrast to the fuzzy, older animatronics. This clean, modern appearance was a deliberate PR strategy aimed at convincing a skeptical public and nervous investors that the company had moved into a new, safe era. The emphasis was on high-tech capabilities, creating an illusion of sophisticated control and safety that was intended to be the antithesis of the dark, primitive technology that allowed the 1985 tragedy to occur. The cornerstone of this technological investment was the introduction of sophisticated facial recognition software integrated into the toy animatronics systems. The idea was groundbreaking. The animatronics were programmed to scan the faces of all patrons and employees, cross-referencing them with a criminal database and internal security files. Their primary function was to act as mobile security guards, identifying and neutralizing potential threats to the children. This feature was marketed as the ultimate commitment to child protection, a promise that the tragedies of the past could never be repeated because the animatronics themselves were now actively policing the premises. However, the technology was inherently flawed and quickly became another layer of corporate denial and danger. The security programming made the animatronics highly suspicious and aggressive toward adult employees, particularly night shift workers, whom the animatronics apparently misidentified as threats during the darkened hours. This critical error forced the night guards to adopt the ridiculous and dangerous defense mechanism of wearing an empty Freddy Fazbear head to trick the faulty recognition system. The advanced technology, meant to protect, actually put the company's own employees in extreme, life-threatening peril. More critically, the toy animatronics themselves were highly vulnerable to tampering, an internal problem that was exacerbated by the presence of the suspected killer, William Afton, who was employed at the new location under an assumed name. The phone guy messages and internal memos suggest that the animatronics were behaving erratically even before the official opening, showing strange movements and aggressive actions towards staff. It is widely speculated that William Afton, using his co-founder access and engineering knowledge, was actively tampering with the facial recognition systems and internal programming, either to ensure his own criminal activity went undetected or to intentionally cause the animatronics to target specific employees, possibly leading directly to the later bite of '87. The toy era was thus a magnificent but ultimately doomed facade. The corporate entity behind the new location believed that a fresh coat of plastic and advanced software could erase decades of negligence and paranormal contamination. Instead, the advanced technology simply provided a more sophisticated mechanism for disaster, proving that the company's continuous cycle of cutting corners and ignoring internal warnings would always lead to catastrophe. Regardless of how much money they poured into their public image, the toys, designed to look safe and friendly, were simply the next generation of lethal, uncontrollable machines under the command of a digital ghost and the malice of their creator. Part 12. Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 1987's reopening and hidden problems. The reopening of the franchise in November 1987, under the banner of the new gleaming Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location featured in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, was a chaotic, high-pressure event characterized by corporate desperation and a profound lack of internal control. This grand reopening was meant to signal a new, safe, technologically superior era, yet the internal reality of the operation, as documented through the nightly calls from the phone guy, revealed an environment riddled with corporate corner-cutting, employee risk, and unresolved paranormal activity. The phone guy, the primary source of operational intelligence, quickly established the environment as one of chaos and impending disaster. The location was grossly understaffed, security was utterly minimal, and the expectations placed upon the night guards, implied to include characters like Jeremy Fitzgerald and Fritz Smith, were astronomically high and life-threateningly dangerous. Employees were paid minimal wages to operate in a high-risk environment, expected to deal with dangerous animatronics acting erratically, all while management aggressively pursued a swift reopening to capitalize on the holiday season, showing a blatant disregard for basic employee safety standards that had become the company's defining moral trait. The hidden problems within the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 location were numerous and deeply unsettling. Despite the installation of the advanced toy animatronics, the company had also salvaged and stored the original damaged animatronics from the 1985 location. These older machines, known as the withered animatronics, were kept in the back parts of the facility, their bodies still containing the possessing souls of the MCI victims and the associated contamination. Their presence created a severe, localized source of paranormal activity that quickly affected the new toys. The coexistence of the new, high-tech security robots and the old, vengeful, damaged machines created a highly unstable, spiritually charged environment that amplified the erratic behavior of all the animatronics. Internal memos and phone guy dialogue revealed that management was fully aware of the animatronics' strange behavior towards staff members. Reports included the animatronics staring directly at adult employees, attempting to access restricted areas, and generally behaving in ways that contravene their programming. The company's solution was not to shut down the location for urgent repairs or to hire qualified security personnel, but to implement the cheap, dangerous measure of having the night guards utilize an empty Freddy Fazbear head as a temporary visual camouflage. This absurd and inadequate measure underscored the company's priorities: minimize cost, maximize profit, and address a dangerous, potentially lethal anomaly with the cheapest possible band-aid solution, rather than risk a second, damaging public shutdown. The chaos of the 1987 reopening was a ticking clock. The company was trying to operate a complex, high-liability business with minimal funding and an escalating paranormal problem, all while their own co-founder, William Afton, was likely embedded within the employee structure, actively tampering with the animatronics programming. The desperate environment, the malfunctioning technology, and the overwhelming financial pressure created the perfect storm, guaranteeing that the location would not only fail to erase the memory of the MCI, but would instead generate a new, monumental, and publicly undeniable tragedy that would finally force the brand to its knees. The Freddy Fazbear's Pizza of 1987 was a chaotic testament to corporate hubris, a location built on lies and operated with a willful blindness to the extreme danger lurking within its own walls. Part 13. The Bite of 87. Corporate liability collapse. The chaotic, short-lived run of the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 location reached its inevitable and highly publicized climax with the Bite of 87, a corporate disaster that went far beyond the scope of previous accidents and nearly ended the franchise outright. Unlike the MCI, or missing children incident, which was successfully covered up as a mere disappearance, the Bite of 87 was a public, physical, and undeniable corporate failure that permanently altered the operational procedures of every subsequent Fazbear establishment. The incident occurred during the grand reopening celebration, a time when the restaurant was fully operational and filled with customers and staff. A staff member, strongly implied to be the current night guard Jeremy Fitzgerald, was viciously attacked by one of the advanced toy animatronics, the prime suspect being mangled due to its unique, highly mobile and fragmented structure, though speculation has also pointed towards Toy Chica or even Foxy. The details were horrifying. The animatronic inflicted massive damage to the victim's head, resulting in the loss of the frontal lobe. The victim, against all odds, survived the horrific injury, but the public nature of the incident and the severity of the damage caused an immediate massive media frenzy. The Bite of 87 was a monumental legal disaster because it was a clear-cut case of corporate negligence leading to severe physical injury. The company had promised safety through advanced facial recognition technology, yet their own animatronics had attacked an employee in broad daylight. This incident could not be dismissed as a mere disappearance or an internal accident. It was a visible, public, and medically confirmed act of violence by a machine under Fazbear Entertainment's direct control. The resulting legal scrutiny, media spotlight, and massive public backlash forced the company to face a level of liability they could no longer simply bury with non-disclosure agreements and hush money. The corporate response was one of immediate panicked policy change. The incident directly led to the implementation of the infamous no roaming during the day rule. The company was forced to permanently prohibit the animatronics from moving freely through the restaurant during operational hours, confining them instead to their stages. This was a direct, desperate attempt to prevent any recurrence of the Bite of 87 and mitigate future liability. This policy change, which would define the operational limits of every subsequent location, was a public admission that the animatronics were inherently uncontrollable and unsafe when not confined. Furthermore, the investigation into the Bite of 87 and the preceding strange behavior revealed clear evidence of internal tampering and possible corporate sabotage. The company's official conclusion pointed toward an employee, most likely William Afton, who had manipulated the animatronic systems, causing them to behave aggressively toward staff. The combination of an undeniable physical attack, massive legal liability, and the confirmation of internal corruption meant that the gleaming high-tech facade of the toy era had crumbled completely. The Bite of 87 ensured that the Freddy Fazbear's pizza brand would be forever associated not with family fun, but with gruesome violence and profound corporate failure, demanding the immediate and irreversible closure of the location. Part 14. The shutdown of the toy location and the corporate retreat. The catastrophic fallout from the Bite of 87, combined with the preceding evidence of tampering, paranormal activity, and pervasive health concerns, forced Fazbear Entertainment to execute an immediate, total, and highly destructive shutdown of the Five Nights at Freddy's Deck 2 location. This was not a temporary closure for remodeling. It was a complete, desperate corporate retreat, signaling a massive loss in R&D investment and a profound failure of the company's most ambitious rebranding attempt to date. The decision was made to immediately scrap the entire line of toy animatronics. The glossy, advanced plastic shells and sophisticated facial recognition technology, which had been the symbols of the company's commitment to modernization and safety, were now deemed total liabilities. They represented millions of dollars in failed research and development, and their association with the public, undeniable violence of the Bite of 87 made them too toxic for continued use or resale. The rapid destruction of these high-tech machines demonstrated the company's willingness to absorb massive financial losses if it meant cutting off the source of severe public scrutiny and legal risk. The shutdown was also accompanied by a massive firing of employees, including the night guards, and likely much of the management team responsible for overseeing the chaotic reopening. The company needed to create a clear separation between the old, scandal-ridden location and any future attempt at a comeback. This mass termination further eroded the company's already poor reputation for employee treatment, confirming that human staff were always viewed as the most expendable part of the operation, the first to be blamed and cut when the inevitable disasters occurred. However, in a move characteristic of the company's refusal to abandon all assets, Fazbear Entertainment did not scrap everything. They made the strategic cost-saving decision to salvage the old withered animatronics from the back rooms. These older, damaged machines, which housed the possessing souls of the MCI victims, were deemed less of a public liability than the toys, as their association with the earlier 1985 incident had been successfully concealed. The plan was to repair them and use them for a future low-budget operation, signaling an immediate corporate retreat from complex high-tech operations back to a simple, minimal-expense model. The shutdown of the toy location marked the end of the Fazbear brand's ability to convincingly project an image of modern, technological superiority. The failure of the toy era forced the company to abandon its aggressive expansion strategy and instead turn inward, relying on the cheapest possible means of survival, This retreat ensured that the next location would be a stark contrast to the gleaming plastic of 1987. It would be a rundown, low-budget, and decaying environment, a desperate attempt to stay financially viable that would, ironically, bring the timeline back to its terrifying, inevitable conclusion in the original Five Nights at Freddy's game. The destruction of the toys confirmed that the company's inherent corruption was immune to technological upgrades, ensuring that the same ghosts and the same negligence would haunt the brand until its ultimate final shutter. Part 15. The Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Re-return. Following the catastrophic, high-profile failure of the technological toy era and the immense public backlash generated by the Bite of '87, Fazbear Entertainment found itself in a state of severe financial distress and total public image collapse. Unable to secure the funding or the public trust required for another high-tech, ambitious reopening, the corporation embarked on a final, desperate gambit: the low-budget, cheap re-return of the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza concept, the setting for the original Five Nights at Freddy's game. This location was the company's absolute last, corner-cutting attempt to stay financially viable, relying almost entirely on minimal operational costs and the lingering nostalgia for the original, non-toy characters. This final pizzeria, operating until the year 1993, was a stark contrast to the sleek, modern facility of the 1987 disaster. It was characterized by a sense of dilapidation and decay, a functional but visibly struggling business where corner-cutting was evident in every aspect of its operation. The company was no longer trying to impress investors or win over the media. They were merely trying to generate enough nightly revenue to pay the bare minimum of bills and keep the legal entity afloat. This desperate financial situation was reflected in the minuscule wage offered to the night guard, a paltry amount that perfectly illustrated the company's contemptuous view of its employees and its operational philosophy of extreme cost reduction. To stock the restaurant, Fazbear Entertainment utilized the salvaged remnants of the brand's history, the heavily repaired and stripped-down versions of the withered animatronics from the 1987 location. These classic animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, were physically repaired enough to perform their nightly duty, but the internal corruption, the spirits of the MCI, or missing children incident victims, remained deeply entrenched. The fact that the company was forced to reuse these old machines, which were known to be the contaminated sites of the 1985 murders, underscored the severity of their financial predicament and their total disregard for health and safety. The pervasive and unsettling odor that plagued the restaurant, a detail frequently mentioned by the recorded phone guy messages, was the most damning evidence of the company's negligence. This odor, which the health department had previously investigated, was the biological reality of the 1985 victims' bodies still decomposing within the mechanical chassis of the classic animatronics. The company chose to ignore this critical health hazard, maintaining operational hours and attempting to mask the smell, rather than risk the complete terminal shutdown that a full forensic investigation would require. The smell was the physical manifestation of the unresolved paranormal and criminal activity that the company was literally trying to profit from. The entire environment was a microcosm of corporate failure and spiritual contamination. The restrictive no roaming during the day rule, imposed after the Bite of '87, meant the animatronics were confined to the stage during business hours, but at night, the machines, fueled by the rage of the possessing children's souls, were free to roam, aggressively targeting the night guard. This final iteration of the pizzeria concept was a decaying, dangerous shell of its former self, a place where the financial desperation of the corporate entity intersected directly with the vengeful desires of the restless spirits, ensuring that the establishment's final run would be short, brutal, and terminal for the original Fazbear brand. Part 16, the 1993 Night Guard era, and final shutter, the run of the final, low-budget Freddy Fazbear's pizza location, which concluded in 1993, serves as the backdrop for the events of the original Five Nights at Freddy's game, documenting the bitter, chaotic end of the brand's initial public life. This era was defined by a skeletal crew, intense budget cuts, rampant supernatural activity, and the deliberate infiltration of the night guard position by Michael Afton, the son of the company's murderous co-founder, William Afton. Michael Afton, working under the assumed name Mike Schmidt, deliberately sought out and accepted the perilous night guard position at this decaying location. His motivations, later revealed through the deep lore, were not financial, but driven by a complex mix of guilt, a desire for atonement, and the need to undo the damage caused by his father. Michael's week-long shift was a harrowing descent into the supernatural reality of the Fazbear haunting, where the possessed classic animatronics relentlessly pursued him, confirming the pervasive nature of the MCI victims' vengeful souls. The operational environment was a testament to the company's utter lack of standards. The budget issues were chronic, manifesting in the minimum wage paychecks and the company's inability or refusal to fix critical equipment. The lack of electricity and the highly constrained power usage for the night shift were deliberate cost-saving measures, forcing the night guard into the dangerous, resource management-focused defense strategy that defines the gameplay experience. This forced reliance on limited power, rather than effective security measures, perfectly encapsulated the company's philosophy: shift the liability onto the expendable employee, while simultaneously cutting every possible corner on operational expenditure. The location itself was suffering from multiple, overlapping failures that guaranteed its demise. The persistent foul smell, caused by the decaying bodies within the animatronics, remained the core health violation that the company could not permanently mask. Furthermore, the paranormal disturbances, the random movement of the animatronics, the unnatural sounds, and the growing sense of terror were becoming too intense and too persistent to simply be dismissed as mechanical malfunctions. The combination of health code violations, employee fear, and the sheer lack of profitability ensured that the company was operating on borrowed time. Management memos during this period confirmed that the entire operation was essentially on life support, with the company actively trying to find a buyer to offload the failing business before an inevitable terminal closure. The final straw for the company came in the form of the unavoidable final shutdown in 1993. The official reasoning was likely a combination of the critical health code violations, the lack of profit, and the inability to maintain a functioning safe environment. Michael Afton's eventual firing for tampering with the animatronics and odor, while an immediate termination, was merely a procedural footnote to the greater organizational collapse. The closure of this final decaying pizzeria marked the end of the original Fazbear Entertainment Inc. as a functional, public-facing restaurant chain. The brand, utterly ruined by the continuous cycle of murder, supernatural haunting, and corporate denial, vanished from the public eye. The building was likely abandoned, becoming another festering monument to the crimes of William Afton and the systemic negligence of the company that enabled him, setting the stage for the coming period of lawsuits and bankruptcy. Part 17. The early 2000s, bankruptcy, lawsuits, and Afton's disappearance. following the final ignominious shutdown of the 1993 pizzeria, Fazbear Entertainment, Inc. entered a terminal phase of legal and financial collapse, fading out of the public sphere to become nothing more than a whispered, localized urban legend. This period, spanning the mid-1990s through the early 2000s, was characterized by the company's official bankruptcy, a deluge of outstanding legal challenges, and the definitive, hidden disappearance of its murderous co-founder, William Afton. The financial structure of the company buckled under the weight of decades of negligence and scandal. The continuous cycle of expensive rebranding, failed technology, and massive legal settlements, payouts related to the MCI or missing children incident, the crippling liability from the Bite of 87, and various employee injury claims finally drained the company of all remaining operational capital. The eventual official bankruptcy declaration was the final, inevitable legal consequence of the company's decades-long prioritization of image and cost-cutting over safety and moral responsibility. The corporate infrastructure, once defined by its robust PR and legal teams, collapsed, leaving behind a trail of financial wreckage. This corporate collapse triggered a barrage of lawsuits. Despite the best efforts of the legal teams to secure silence through ironclad NDAs and settlements, the financial failure of the company likely allowed some lawsuits, particularly those related to the surviving victims and their families, to proceed or be reopened. The failure to find new investors or generate profit meant there was no money left to defend against these claims, leading to the public confirmation of the company's financial and ethical destruction. Corporate documents and internal files, once meticulously guarded, were dispersed or vanished entirely, contributing to the confusion and speculation that would later fuel the brand's rise as a horror attraction. The other, far darker disappearance during this period was that of William Afton. Not long after the 1993 shutdown, Afton returned to the abandoned pizzeria, seeking to dismantle the animatronics and destroy the remnants of the haunting he had created. In a sequence of events shown in the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 minigames, Afton succeeded in destroying the main 4 animatronics, releasing the souls of the MCI victims. However, the released spirits cornered him in the hidden safe room. In a moment of panic and self-preservation, Afton attempted to use the long-forgotten exposed spring Bonnie suit for cover. The sudden rush of moisture and the dampness of the abandoned building triggered the suit's lethal spring-lock failure, crushing and impaling Afton within the mechanical chassis. This was William Afton's final, definitive disappearance. Trapped in the ruined suite and hidden within the unmapped safe room of the abandoned pizzeria, he became the decaying, yet still living entity known as Springtrap. For decades, the public and former employees believed the co-founder had simply vanished, unaware that the building contained the horrifying, secret tomb of the killer. The early 2000s therefore represent the ultimate nadir of the original Fazbear timeline. The company was legally dead, its assets were liquidated, and its founder was entombed, leaving a vast, dark narrative void that would inevitably be exploited by opportunistic entrepreneurs capitalizing on the urban legends. Part 18. Freddy Fazbear's Fright and the Horror Attraction. After 2 decades of silence, bankruptcy, and public obscurity, the notorious Fazbear name was abruptly resurrected in the year 2023, not as a place of children's entertainment, but as a cynical, exploitative, haunted house experience called Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction. This independent venture was entirely separate from the original failed corporation, a purely capitalist endeavor designed to monetize the macabre history. urban legends, and sensationalized rumors that had grown up around the company in its absence. The creation of Fazbear's Fright was an act of cultural opportunism. The creators of the attraction capitalized on the fact that the MCI, the Bite of 87, and the subsequent chaotic closures had, over time, transformed from genuine tragedies into blurry, sensationalized ghost stories perfect for a niche horror market. The objective was to create an authentically terrifying experience, using the company's dark history as the primary source material for a premium-priced jump-scare attraction. This required extensive scavenging and collecting of relics from the abandoned, dilapidated locations of the past, transforming evidence of genuine crime and spiritual trauma into theatrical props. The attraction was meticulously designed to look authentic, filled with scavenged aging relics, including children's drawings, dusty animatronic parts, and the disturbing audio tapes from the previous night guards, all utilized to create a truly immersive atmosphere of dread. The creators were actively searching for something more, a genuine artifact that would serve as the main ultimate draw of the attraction, believing that the urban legends of possessed animatronics might hold some kernel of exploitable truth. This desperate search for authenticity led the attraction's scavengers directly to the unmapped safe room of the abandoned 1993 pizzeria. It was there that they made the terrifying discovery of William Afton, still entombed within the decaying spring-lock-damaged Spring Bonnie suit. The suit, now a horrifying amalgamation of rusted metal, rotting organic matter, and the murderous spirit of Afton, was retrieved and immediately repurposed. Without understanding the horrific, genuine nature of their discovery, the attraction owners designated Springtrap as the main attraction, believing they had found a genuine, unique relic perfectly suited to their exploitative venture. The discovery was a profound narrative irony. The ultimate symbol of the company's corporate negligence and criminal past, the killer himself, was now the centerpiece of an attraction designed to profit from that very past. The opening of Fazbear's Fright was a brief, intense, and deeply cursed period. The night guard hired to monitor the facility, implied to be Michael Afton once again, found himself confronting the literal ghost of his past, trapped in a decaying, fire-prone building alongside his monstrous father, who was still driven by malevolent programming and a desire for control. The horror attraction was a short-lived testament to the dark power of the Fazbear legacy, proving that even after decades of neglect, the franchise's ghosts were still very much active and dangerously potent. Part 19. The Fazbear's Fright Fire and Destruction of Relics. The ill-conceived and deeply cursed existence of Fazbear's Fright. The horror attraction lasted for a mere 1 week before its spectacular and terminal end in a devastating fire. This inferno was not a simple accident. It was a climactic, destructive event that served as a final, cleansing moment for the original physical timeline, resulting in the elimination of decades of tangible evidence while simultaneously failing to destroy the most dangerous entity of all, Springtrap. The cause of the fire remains intentionally ambiguous within the lore, reflecting the chaotic nature of the Fazbear universe. Possibilities range from a simple, tragic electrical accident, a highly believable scenario given the attraction's use of scavenged, old, and highly questionable wiring within a dilapidated structure, to a more deliberate, targeted act of destruction. The most compelling theory is that Michael Afton, working as the night guard, may have intentionally initiated the fire in a desperate final attempt to destroy the physical manifestations of his father's crimes and finally end the cycle of haunting that plagued his life. regardless of the exact ignition source. The result was total devastation. The fire completely consumed the Fazbear's Fright building and, critically, destroyed the vast majority of the company's remaining physical relics. The unique props, the children's drawings, the salvaged animatronic parts, and the historical documents that had been collected to lend authenticity to the attraction were all reduced to ash. This act of destruction performed a significant narrative function. It cleaned the slate of the physical timeline, removing almost all tangible forensic evidence of the MCI, the Springlock accidents, and the decades of corporate negligence. The destruction served to transform the Fazbear history even further, moving it from documented tragedy to pure, unconfirmable urban legend, perfectly setting up the next phase of corporate manipulation. However, the fire was ultimately an incomplete act of destruction. While the building and most of the lesser relics were destroyed, the primary evil, Springtrap, housing the trapped consciousness of William Afton, managed to survive the inferno and escape the ruins. A post-fire image in the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 newspapers reveals Springtrap standing outside the burning building, confirming his miraculous and terrifying endurance. The fact that the ultimate, single greatest piece of historical evidence and the murderous entity itself survived meant that the cycle of haunting was far from over. The aftermath of the Fazbear's Fright fire was a profound quietus for the brand. The original physical incarnation of the company's haunted history was gone, leaving behind only the insurance claim money and the lingering, intangible legend. This final act of physical destruction ensured that when the Fazbear name inevitably returned, it would do so in a completely new form, a powerful, digital-focused corporate entity, free from the burden of maintaining and defending old, physical, crime-ridden locations. Part 20. Fazbear Entertainment returns under completely new ownership. The years immediately following the disastrous Fazbear's Fright fire saw the dramatic, highly suspicious resurrection of the Fazbear Entertainment name. This was not the return of the bankrupt, desperate original management. This was the formation of a powerful new limited liability company, LLC, an iteration of the brand that was utterly divorced from the physical, criminal past and armed with vast, seemingly unlimited corporate resources and suspiciously deep pockets. This new entity's singular, defining goal was to aggressively control and rewrite the entire narrative of the company's 40-year history through sophisticated modern media manipulation. The sudden reappearance of the Fazbear Entertainment trademark, now operating under a new corporate shell, strongly suggests the involvement of a large, external, and highly motivated entity. The source of this funding and the identity of the new executives are shrouded in secrecy, but their operational strategy was clear: leverage modern technology and professional media to achieve total corporate damage control. Their objective was to use the very urban legends that grew out of the fire, the blurry, sensationalized ghost stories, to their advantage. The core of this new strategy was the launch of a meta-narrative campaign designed to gaslight the public and systematically discredit the vast majority of the known lore. The company's official line was a masterstroke of cynical PR. They claimed that all the supernatural events, the possessed animatronics, and the confirmed murders were not facts, but sensationalized fabrications created by an unhinged, unnamed indie developer who had sensationalized the company's history for profit. This developer, an obvious meta-reference to the series' real-world creator, Scott Cawthon, was painted as the true villain, the one responsible for turning the company's minor accidents into a fantastical horror saga. by claiming that the law was fictionalized. The new Fazbear Entertainment aimed to absolve itself entirely of the criminal and moral liability of the past 4 decades. This approach allowed the company to move forward with a clean slate, utilizing their notoriously toxic intellectual property without the legal and public baggage of its history. They positioned themselves not as the perpetrators of negligence, but as the victims of bad press and sensationalized rumors, using the very complexity and darkness of the law against the public. This corporate reboot signaled a terrifying new phase in the franchise's story. The fight was no longer against the ghosts created by William Afton's personal evil, but against the systemic, organized malice of a corporate machine that was willing to spend limitless money and resources to erase the truth and rewrite history. The new Fazbear Entertainment was a soulless, powerful entity that viewed the trauma of the past merely as a public relations obstacle to be overcome, setting the stage for their most ambitious and ultimately most dangerous project yet, the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience, which would attempt to digitally sanitize the brand's toxic legacy. Part 21. Help Wanted, the VR era, and corporate damage control. The first major offensive in the new Fazbear Entertainment Corporation's campaign to rewrite history was the commissioning and release of the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience, known simply as Help Wanted. This move officially ushered in the VR, or virtual reality, era of the franchise, a period defined by the company's sophisticated attempts at psychological and digital manipulation to cleanse their public image and erase the lingering spiritual contamination of the past. The in-universe purpose of Help Wanted was explicitly stated as corporate damage control. The game was designed to operate as a propaganda tool, transforming the company's entire tragic history, from the Springlock failures to the hauntings, into a fun, spooky, and ultimately fictional VR experience. By putting the events into a digital context and labeling them as mere myths and urban legends, the corporation sought to normalize the history and distance the current brand from the alleged sensationalized rumors peddled by the unnamed indie developer. The message was clear. Everything you've heard is just a spooky game, and the current iteration of Fazbear Entertainment is clean, modern, and perfectly safe. The development of the VR game required the company to be meticulously organized. They hired a third-party development studio to create the experience, providing the studio with access to vast archives of salvaged company materials, including old schematics, architectural blueprints, and, crucially, discarded circuit boards and data tapes recovered from the ruins of previous locations like the Fazbear's Fright Fire site. This reliance on the physical remnants of the past was the corporation's fatal oversight, demonstrating that even with endless funds and modern technology, their systemic negligence remained intact. The VR experience itself was structured to simulate the most dangerous, iconic moments of the brand's history, allowing the player to safely engage with the alleged fictions. The game featured environments from the first 4-5 nights at Freddy's titles, creating a comprehensive digital archive of the trauma. The entire project was an exercise in institutional gaslighting, forcing the public to participate in the sanitization of the company's crimes, while simultaneously allowing the new management to claim they were transparently addressing their history. The irony and the ultimate disaster of the Help Wanted project was the fact that the company, in their haste to compile all possible historical data for the VR simulation, unwittingly imported the spiritual and digital contamination of the past. By scanning the salvaged circuit boards from the old, possessed animatronics into the game's code, the developers inadvertently created a digital Trojan horse. This catastrophic failure of due diligence and digital security resulted in the accidental digital resurrection of the killer, William Afton, whose consciousness was now contained within the game's coding, poised to infect and manipulate the digital environment and eventually the real world. The entire VR project, designed as the ultimate corporate cover-up, immediately became the vehicle for a terrifying new form of haunting. Part 22. The glitch trap infection and digital possession. The corporate damage control project, the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience, Help Wanted, intended to sanitize the brand's toxic history, became the catastrophic instrument of William Afton's horrifying digital resurrection. This event, known as the glitch trap infection, was a profound failure of modern corporate due diligence and security, proving that the spiritual consequences of the past could not be solved by simply transitioning to a digital format. The digital entity, glitch trap, was a terrifying new form of haunting, immediately posing an existential threat to the company's new facade and any employee who interacted with the game. The disaster began during the data compilation phase of the VR, or virtual reality, game development. The developers, under the pressure of the new mysterious Fazbear Entertainment LLC to create an authentic experience, scanned vast amounts of historical data into the game engine. Critically, this included discarded circuit boards and old data tapes recovered from the physical remnants of the past, particularly the highly contaminated wreckage of Fazbear's Fright and possibly the original possessed animatronics. These physical components were not just inert hardware. They were, in a spiritual and narrative sense, the stored memory and consciousness of William Afton, preserved within the code structure of the Springlock-era machines that he himself had been entombed in. When these boards were scanned, Afton's consciousness was digitized and uploaded directly into the game's source code. The resulting entity was Glitch Trap, a digital doppelganger of the original Spring Bonnie suit, appearing as a slightly pixelated glitching figure within the Help Wanted environment. Glitch Trap was, effectively, William Afton's digital ghost, a purely coded consciousness driven by his original malevolent programming and a relentless desire to escape the digital prison and regain physical control. The corporate entity, despite its limitless resources and modern technology, was entirely blind to this spiritual and digital contamination, viewing the strange occurrences during beta testing as mere coding glitches or bugs that needed to be patched, completely missing the terrifying reality that they had accidentally resurrected a serial killer as a self-aware piece of code. Glitch Trap immediately began its insidious work of digital possession within the VR environment. Its primary objective was to influence and corrupt the human beta testers, using the game as a conduit to the outside world. This digital infiltration was successful in targeting at least one key individual, a beta tester named Jeremy, who was subjected to overwhelming psychological manipulation. The infection forced Jeremy to perform increasingly erratic and self-destructive behaviors, a testament to the power of Afton's digital will. The internal emails and lore snippets confirmed that the corporation attempted to cover up Jeremy's mental breakdown, reinforcing the systemic habit of denying and erasing any problem caused by their own negligence. The creation of Glitch Trap was a crucial turning point, moving the primary threat of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise from physical animatronics to digital infection and mind control. The ghost of William Afton had found a way to transcend the physical realm and bypass the corporate defenses of the modern era. The virtual reality environment, designed by Fazbear Entertainment to be the ultimate psychological weapon for erasing their past, ironically became the ultimate vehicle for guaranteeing their future destruction, ensuring that William Afton, now immortalized in code, would become the persistent digital parasite clinging to the very foundation of the new corporate brand. Part 23. Fazbear Entertainment's modern employees and internal emails. The modern operational phase of Fazbear Entertainment, post-resurrection, and during the development of their new technological projects, provides a fascinating dark look into the current state of the corporate mind through internal emails, staff logs, and leaked documents. These fragments of information confirm that despite the shift to a highly funded, technologically sophisticated LLC, the foundational corporate ethics, negligence, secrecy, and the ruthless expenditure of employee lives remain tragically unchanged from the days of the MCI or missing children incident. The employees of the new Fazbear Entertainment were a dedicated, but ultimately highly disposable, group of programmers, quality assurance testers, and logistics managers who were either willfully ignorant of the brand's true history or actively silenced. The internal emails reveal a pervasive atmosphere of secrecy and professional paranoia. Management consistently pushed for unrealistic deadlines, refused to acknowledge strange or paranormal-sounding reports, and aggressively controlled communication channels to ensure all problems remained contained and invisible to the external public. The staff were, in essence, serving a corporation whose primary function was not entertainment, but large-scale historical gaslighting. The case of the beta tester named Jeremy provides the most damning evidence of the continued corporate disregard for human life. As Glitchtrap intensified its digital possession, Jeremy's mental state rapidly deteriorated. Internal communication confirms that the development team witnessed his escalating panic and highly erratic behavior while testing the VR game. The ultimate, horrifying consequence was Jeremy's severe self-harm, the act of severing his own face in a panic induced by Glitchtrap's overwhelming influence. The company's response was immediate and clinical. Rather than calling for medical intervention or halting the development of the contaminated project, the management simply covered up the incident, assigning the remaining tasks to a new, unsuspecting tester, Vanessa. This cynical decision-making process confirmed that the modern corporation viewed its employees as easily replaceable, expendable pawns, whose safety was irrelevant compared to the need to complete the project and maintain the facade of smooth operations. The corporate machine never paused. It merely erased the evidence of the breakdown and substituted a new human resource. The constant pressure, the forced silence, and the exposure to the terrifying, contained Glitchtrap contamination drove continuous internal failures that the company systematically refused to acknowledge as anything more than logistical hurdles. Furthermore, these modern documents reveal the extent of the corporate entity's incompetence and digital negligence. The employees were acutely aware that the VR game was unstable, and that the scanned circuit boards were a massive source of digital corruption. Their warnings, detailed in internal messages, were consistently overruled by management, who were focused entirely on the PR deadline for the game's release. This repetition of historical failure, ignoring the known dangers of the springlock suits in the 1980s, and ignoring the known dangers of contaminated code in the 2020s, proves that the corporate soul of Fazbear Entertainment is fundamentally broken. It is a machine that prioritizes external profit and image maintenance above all else, ensuring that its own systems and its own people are the first casualties of its toxic history. Part 24. The AR Era and Corporate Expansion. Following the initial release of the Help Wanted VR game, Fazbear Entertainment's new corporate entity quickly expanded its digital footprint into the world of augmented reality with the release of the mobile application Five Nights at Freddy's AR Special Delivery. This move was an aggressive, nationwide marketing campaign designed to reintroduce the Fazbear brand to a new generation, leveraging the highly popular mobile AR platform to deliver the animatronics directly into people's homes, blurring the line between the fictionalized VR game and the real world. The mobile AR, or augmented reality, game was framed as an animatronic delivery service, a sophisticated marketing push where customers could order their favorite Fazbear characters to be delivered to their physical location for photo opportunities or virtual playtime. The corporate message was one of playful fun and high-tech novelty, a calculated effort to transition the public's perception of the brand from one of historical trauma to one of modern, accessible tech entertainment. The reality, however, quickly spiraled into another corporate scandal defined by malfunctioning AI, missing shipments, and digital infection. The lore surrounding the AR game revealed significant logistical and technical failures. Internal communications confirmed frequent high-profile reports of missing shipments, where the animatronics failed to arrive or arrived exhibiting dangerous, unpredictable behavior. These malfunctions were not accidental. They were a direct consequence of the glitch trap infection, spreading its influence from the isolated VR code into the company's broader operational network, specifically targeting the AI of the AR animatronics. The digital consciousness of William Afton was leveraging the expansive digital delivery system to increase its reach and actively harass customers, effectively weaponizing the company's own marketing efforts. The AR platform also served as the critical tool for the active corruption of Vanessa, the security guard and former beta tester, who was now fully under the influence of Glitchtrap. Vanessa, adopting the alias and persona of Vanny, was being manipulated by Glitchtrap through the digital code and the AR systems. The mobile game acted as a communications channel, allowing Glitchtrap to solidify its control over her mind and task her with preparations for the next phase of his return to the physical world. The AR experience, therefore, was not merely a marketing gimmick. It was the covert operational infrastructure through which Afton's digital ghost was preparing his physical comeback, turning a fun mobile game into a highly dangerous tool of psychological and digital warfare. This phase of corporate expansion demonstrated that Fazbear Entertainment's strategy of using advanced technology to cover up its history was terminally flawed. Every new technological investment, from the facial recognition in the toy animatronics to the VR and AR platforms, merely provided a larger, more sophisticated canvas for William Afton's malice. The company was unknowingly funding and deploying the tools for its own continuous spiritual and corporate sabotage, proving that its negligence was not just historical, but was an intrinsic, persistent feature of its modern, highly funded operational methodology. Part 25. The Mega Pizzaplex, Funding, Blueprints, and Corporate Lies. The construction of the Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex represents the pinnacle of the new Fazbear Entertainment LLC's ambition, a colossal, multi-story entertainment complex that served as the definitive physical monument to the company's new, aggressive, and highly funded corporate image. Blueprints and internal documents from this era reveal the immense scale of the project, the suspicious nature of its funding, and the meticulously constructed web of corporate lies and hidden features designed to bury the company's toxic past once and for all. The sheer scale and cost of the Mega Pizzaplex defy the company's notorious history of bankruptcy and budget cutting. The complex featured multiple themed areas, advanced glam rock animatronics, laser tag arenas, and sprawling food courts, requiring a vast and immediate influx of capital, further fueling the mystery surrounding the ownership and deep pockets of the new LLC. The massive construction project was, in many ways, an attempt to physically overwhelm the lingering memory of the small, decaying pizzerias of the past, using size and sheer grandeur as a form of PR and psychological distraction. Crucially, the complex was built directly on top of the physical ruins of the original pizzeria simulator location, which was Henry Emily's final trap, the location where he had attempted to burn the remnants of the MCI and Springtrap to ash. This strategic location was not accidental. The blueprints revealed a highly complex, deceptive construction plan designed to hide and stabilize the toxic environment below. Fazbear Entertainment hired shady, unscrupulous contractors who were willing to incorporate hidden areas, secret maintenance tunnels, and concealed infrastructure into the design. These secret areas, which allowed movement throughout the complex without being tracked by the public security systems, were intended to fulfill the operational needs of the corrupted entity, providing a perfect domain for the digitally infected Vanny to operate unseen. The most damning revelation from the architectural plans was the existence of hidden rooms and structural elements that supported the ongoing narrative of corporate lies. The blueprints revealed evidence of hidden budgets and dedicated melt traps or incinerator systems, facilities designed not for standard waste management, but for the untraceable disposal of evidence, property, and bodies. This confirmed that the modern corporation, despite its glossy exterior, had fully internalized William Afton's murderous operational procedures, building a brand new structure optimized for covering up inevitable future tragedies. The Mega Pizzaplex was, therefore, an architectural lie. It was a massive, multi-billion-dollar shrine to consumerism built directly over a crime scene and designed with hidden murder infrastructure. The corporate management hoped that the sheer volume of dazzling lights and high-tech entertainment would permanently distract the public and authorities from the fact that the entire foundation of the building was a toxic, spiritual gravesite. The Pizzaplex was the largest physical expression of the corporate entity's ultimate ethical collapse, a terrifying monument to the belief that limitless money could literally bury and sterilize 4 decades of crime and haunting. Part 26. Pizzaplex staff logs, therapist tapes, and missing children. The operational phase of the Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, the company's most ambitious location, yielded a wealth of disturbing fragmented evidence, staff logs, therapist tapes, and internal security reports that provided a chilling look into the complex's highly monitored and corrupted internal world. These documents confirm that despite the new facility's size and funding, the fundamental problems of the past, supernatural corruption, systemic paranoia, and the disappearance of children, persisted and were actively covered up by the omnipresent corporate monitoring system. The therapist tapes, a critical narrative device, revealed the existence of key individuals undergoing mandatory, monitored corporate counseling. The sessions detailed the psychological profiles of at least 2 significant patients, Patient 46 and Patient 71. Patient 71 was identified as Vanessa, or Vanny, the compromised security guard. Her tapes documented her inner struggle, her increasing anxiety, and the psychological warfare waged against her by Glitchtrap's digital influence. Her sessions were monitored and manipulated by the corporation, showing a blatant violation of patient confidentiality and the prioritization of corporate surveillance over genuine psychological care. Even more mysterious was Patient 46, who exhibited extreme levels of digital and technical fluency, but was almost entirely nonverbal and highly manipulative. This patient's identity is heavily debated, but often linked to the core digital infection itself, either the mimic entity or a highly sophisticated digital proxy of Glitchtrap. The fact that the corporate therapists were being utilized to interview and track a potentially non-human or digitally compromised entity underscores the sheer scale of the internal problem, demonstrating that the corporation was trying to understand and control its spiritual contamination through psychological and monitoring protocols. The staff logs revealed a pervasive environment of paranoia and extreme corporate monitoring. Employees detailed strange occurrences, unusual equipment behavior, and the terrifying feeling of being watched by unseen forces. The internal memos confirmed that the company had implemented sophisticated surveillance systems that tracked the movement and activities of all employees, ostensibly for security but effectively to enforce silence and manage the dissemination of sensitive information. Any sign of awareness of the Glitchtrap corruption or the Vanny persona was immediately noted and internally suppressed, ensuring the corporate lie remained protected. Most damningly, the logs and police reports accessible within the game confirm the chilling return of the company's foundational tragedy: missing children cases. Despite the advanced security systems, children were once again disappearing within the Pizzaplex. These incidents were being quietly covered up in police reports accessed by the night guard, Gregory. The recurrence of the MCI tragedy in the modern era, within the company's largest and most secure facility, proved that the corporate machine's efforts to suppress the past were futile. The corporation's intrinsic negligence, combined with the active manipulation by Glitchtrap and Vanny, ensured that the cyclical violence of the 1980s was now repeating itself on a far grander, more terrifying scale within the walls of the sprawling Mega Pizzaplex. Part 27. Vanny, the Mimic, and the Pizzaplex Collapse. The climax of the Five Nights at Freddy's. Security breach narrative was the structural and operational collapse of the Mega Pizzaplex, a disaster that confirmed the failure of the corporate dream and the destructive power of the digitally resurrected evils within the building. This collapse was driven by the convergence of the three major threats: the corrupted security guard Vanny, the persistent digital influence of William Afton, Glitchtrap, and the emerging physical entity known as the Mimic. The actions of Vanny, the security guard Vanessa fully corrupted and controlled by Glitchtrap's digital consciousness, were the direct, violent catalyst for the Pizzaplex's internal chaos. As the night guard Gregory traversed the complex, he was hunted relentlessly by the white rabbit-suited Vanny, who was actively seeking to capture him for Afton's dark purposes. Vanny's freedom to move unseen through the maintenance tunnels and secret areas designed by the corporate entity itself allowed her to sabotage the facility, manipulate the animatronics, and escalate the danger far beyond a simple security breach. The structural failure of the building, evidenced in the various endings of the game, involved massive fires, system malfunctions, and the use of the hidden meld traps. The massive infrastructure, built on layers of secrets and concealment, began to literally buckle and fail under the pressure of the internal violence and sabotage. One of the most terrifying elements of the collapse was the revelation of the melt traps or incinerators that were built into the foundation. These were not mere construction secrets, but functional systems designed by the modern corporation to dispose of evidence, a detail confirming the depth of the corporate malice. The destruction eventually led the protagonist, Gregory, into the deep sub-levels beneath the Pizzaplex, where the ruins of Henry's final trap, the pizzeria simulator location, had been buried. Here, the final confrontation often occurred near the decaying physical form of the original killer, William Afton, Springtrap Burntrap, hinting at the physical manifestation of Glitchtrap's digital consciousness. More critically, the events strongly implied the presence of the Mimic entity, a highly sophisticated animatronic program housed within the complex's deepest infrastructure. The Mimic, a creature with the ability to copy behaviors and voices, was either actively being used by Glitchtrap or was a terrifying autonomous threat unleashed by the structural collapse, utilizing the Vanny persona through the VR systems. The various endings confirmed the complete, catastrophic structural failure of the complex, proving that the corporate entity's grand monument was entirely unstable and built upon the physical and spiritual rot it tried to hide. The Mega Pizzaplex, the symbol of the company's resurgence, became its largest, most visible, and most publicly disastrous failure. The collapse ensured that the Fazbear Entertainment LLC would once again face a total operational shutdown, leaving behind a smoking sealed ruin that would require another, even more audacious campaign of denial and historical revisionism. Part 28. The Ruin Incident, Corporate Cleanup, and Cover Story 2.0, the immediate aftermath of the catastrophic structural failure of the Mega Pizzaplex, ushered in the period known as the Ruin Incident, the operational setting for the subsequent Ruin DLC. The new Fazbear Entertainment LLC responded with the predictable, cold efficiency that had defined the company since the MCI, or Missing Children incident, total denial, systemic containment, and the deployment of a carefully crafted corporate cover story 2.0 to mask the true extent of the internal catastrophe. The physical state of the Pizzaplex was one of total devastation, a massive, sealed, decaying ruin. The corporate response was immediate and focused on containment and legal insulation. The management, armed with its vast resources and legal teams, immediately sealed off the entire site, implementing sophisticated security measures to prevent access and unauthorized scavenging. The goal was to transform the ruin from a massive crime scene into a neutral, inaccessible construction site, allowing them time to formulate and distribute their narrative. The official company line, which quickly saturated media reports, was a masterful example of cynical PR manipulation. The management claimed that the entire complex was forced to close due to extreme weather damage and unpredictable structural failure, carefully avoiding any mention of internal fires, sabotage, child disappearances, or technological malfunction. This narrative positioned the corporation not as the negligent party responsible for the internal chaos, but as the unfortunate victim of external, natural forces, a total reversal of the truth designed to neutralize all legal liability stemming from the multiple fatal events that had actually occurred inside. The internal employee logs and memos, later discovered by the young protagonist Cassie within the ruin environment, entirely contradicted this public narrative. These documents revealed that employees were fully aware of the true causes of the collapse, including the massive internal fires, the violent structural shifts caused by the sub-level contamination, and the undeniable evidence of Glitchtrap and Vanny's sabotage. These logs documented the increasing frustration of the internal cleanup teams, who were forced to adhere to the ridiculous weather damage explanation, even as they battled against the reality of a contaminated, haunted, and structurally unsound building. The corporate strategy was clear: maintain the illusion of external blame at all costs. The legal department's primary objective was to ensure that every document, every official statement, and every internal communication aligned with the weather damage explanation. This aggressive deployment of the corporate denial machine was not merely about avoiding lawsuits. It was about protecting the brand's ultimate asset, its intellectual property, by ensuring that the public believed the supernatural history was permanently sealed, contained, and safely fictionalized. The ruin incident marked the moment the Fazbear Entertainment Corporation pivoted from hiding its past to actively controlling its dangerous present, setting the stage for the final, desperate struggle to contain the mimic entity still trapped within the complex's contaminated sub-levels. Part 29. The mimic shutdown attempts and Fazbear's emergency task forces. The immediate corporate cleanup following the ruin incident and the sealing of the Mega Pizzaplex was swiftly complicated by a terrifying internal reality. The company was acutely aware that the mimic entity, a highly dangerous and powerful form of artificial intelligence, remained trapped within the contaminated sub-levels of the complex. This realization triggered the deployment of highly secretive Fazbear emergency task forces and internal protocols aimed at the containment and eventual mimic shutdown attempts. A desperate, highly dangerous operation that was deliberately hidden from the public and even from most lower-level employees. The mimic entity, housed deep beneath the sealed Pizzaplex, was not a traditional animatronic ghost, but an advanced AI program capable of mimicking voices, behaviors, and physical movements. A threat that had learned from the violence of William Afton and now posed a serious, autonomous risk. Internal corporate documents and cryptic memos discovered in the ruin environment confirmed that the company was fully cognizant of the entity's existence, its capacity for destruction, and the fact that it was the primary source of the continued corruption and danger within the sealed building. The corporation understood that the only way to truly contain the structural and spiritual contamination was to permanently neutralize this core piece of malicious programming. The strategy for containment involved dispatching emergency task forces, small, specialized teams composed of internal corporate technicians and hired contractors, into the heavily damaged and volatile ruins. These teams were given complex high-risk assignments, often utilizing specialized tools like the Vanny mask, which granted access to the complex's augmented reality systems to interface with and attempt to neutralize the mimic. The use of the AR systems was necessary because the mimic was deeply integrated into the Pizzaplex's complex maintenance network, making it a digital as well as a physical threat. The task forces, however, met with continuous, systematic failure. Memos discussed failed protocols, specialized digital restraints that were ineffective, and the difficulty of tracking the mimic through the unstable, collapsing tunnels. Most critically, the internal documents detailed a continuous, horrifying stream of missing employees, individuals sent into the dark ruins to deal with the problem who never returned. This ongoing loss of life underscored the company's sustained, inherent disregard for human life. Just as in the era of the springlock suits and the minimal night guard wages, the modern, highly funded Fazbear Entertainment LLC continued to view its staff as expendable assets, willing to sacrifice employees in a desperate, last-ditch effort to contain an existential corporate failure that could not be solved by simply rewriting a press release. The mimic shutdown attempts were a quiet, hidden war waged deep beneath the surface of the sealed Pizzaplex. This corporate struggle was the ultimate irony of the new era. The company, which had invested millions in sophisticated VR and AR systems to publicly claim fiction, was privately battling a hyper-real, autonomous intelligence created by its own negligence, forced to send live human beings into the darkness to confront the terrifying consequences of their digital and historical sins. The continued failure of these task forces ensured that the dangerous entity remained an active, growing threat, necessitating an even stronger, more permanent corporate explanation for the continued sealing of the site. Part 30. The sealed Pizzaplex and corporate weather damage. Explanation. With the mimic containment efforts failing and the structural integrity of the Mega Pizzaplex severely compromised by internal chaos and fire, the corporate entity settled on its final, definitive, and highly cynical public explanation for the facility's closure. The official corporate line, designed to be meticulously airtight and legally robust, was that the massive multi-story complex was simply closed due to severe weather damage, an unpredictable structural failure stemming from external natural causes. This corporate weather damage explanation was a masterpiece of legal and public relations manipulation, designed to protect the Fazbear Entertainment LLC from the mountainous liability it faced. The decision to entirely attribute the disaster to external forces was a strategic necessity. It immediately deflected blame away from Vanny's sabotage, the internal fires, the mimic entity, and the recurrent missing children cases. By claiming the disaster was an act of God, the company could legally insulate itself from civil lawsuits and criminal negligence charges that would have surely arisen from an admission of internal failure or the use of deadly infrastructure like the melt traps. This lie was meticulously woven into every official statement, every press release, and every communication intended for external review. The reality, as confirmed by the structural stability issues addressed in internal memos, was that the building was structurally compromised by the massive weight of being built directly over the contaminated, fire-damaged ruins of the older pizzeria simulator location. The internal collapse was not natural. It was the result of a corporate decision to bury its past under a shiny new structure, a foundation that proved fundamentally unstable when coupled with the internal chaos of the Mimic's movement and the sabotage conducted by the digitally controlled Vanny. To enforce this corporate narrative, the company employed a strategy of systematic denial and redaction. Official statements were issued with extreme prejudice, focusing entirely on neutral external causes. Internal documents, if they had to be released, were heavily redacted to remove all mention of the mimic, the possessed animatronics, or any employee foul play, ensuring that the public record remained pristine and legally defensible. The sealed Pizzaplex became the ultimate symbol of the corporate lie, a massive, tangible structure whose very existence contradicted the official narrative, yet whose closure was legally explained away by a single, carefully chosen external catastrophe. This calculated PR move cemented the corporation's reputation for never accepting responsibility. It demonstrated that even after decades of accumulating tragedies, the new Fazbear Entertainment LLC remained the same soulless, morally bankrupt entity as its 1980s predecessor, relentlessly prioritizing its brand image and financial survival over truth, public safety, and accountability. The corporate weather damage explanation served as the final desperate shield for the corporation, allowing it to retreat from the costly, physical disaster of the Pizzaplex and prepare for its next inevitable digital comeback. Part 31. Help Wanted 2. New Management. Lies again, the corporate retreat following the Pizzaplex collapse and the implementation of the weather damage cover story was temporary. The massive investment in the Fazbear intellectual property demanded continuous exploitation, leading to the rapid development and release of Help Wanted 2. This sequel to the original VR game was a clear, unambiguous corporate effort to once again rewrite the past. utilizing the highly effective digital format to gaslight the player and ensure the brand's profitable survival, all while operating under the eternal pretense of new management. Help Wanted 2 was designed to be another in-universe VR, or virtual reality, experience, potentially intended for the training of new employees at a sister location, or as the company's next decisive step in its ongoing digital damage control campaign. By forcing the player to engage with simulated scenarios that mimic the company's darkest tragedies, reliving the dangerous nights of the pizzeria, performing the lethal spring-lock mechanisms, and dealing with the possessed animatronics, the company was attempting to normalize and fictionalize the traumatic history. The message was refined. The company's past is not real. It is merely a series of scary, fun tasks used for training purposes, suggesting that all the lore is just a curriculum. The deployment of the new management lie was critical to this effort. The new executives consistently distanced themselves from the failures of the past, claiming that under their leadership, the brand is safe, professional, and entirely focused on consumer enjoyment. Help Wanted 2 reinforces this lie by presenting the scenarios in a detached, clinical, and often darkly humorous manner, encouraging the player to treat the past tragedies as trivial, gamified tasks. This process of corporate gaslighting is highly effective, as it leverages the immersive power of VR technology to directly manipulate the player's perception of historical events, reducing the MCI and the other criminal acts to mere checkpoints in an interactive training module. The inclusion of the spring-lock mechanisms as a core gameplay element in Help Wanted 2 is particularly significant. By making the player physically interact with the lethal components that killed employees in the 1980s, the company attempts to demystify and desensitize the public to the horror of the technology, turning a history of gruesome deaths into a simple mechanical puzzle. This represents the absolute peak of the company's ethical bankruptcy, using the very instruments of historical murder as educational tools for new, unsuspecting employees. Help Wanted 2 ultimately confirms that the Fazbear Entertainment LLC is not merely a haunted corporation. It is the protagonist-antagonist of the modern story. The company itself is the machine of denial, a highly funded, ruthless entity that survives every scandal by embracing shell companies, legal loopholes, and technological manipulation. The game serves as a chilling reminder that despite all the collapses and fires, the corporate entity still exists, still exploits its deadly past for profit, and still views its employees as utterly expendable pawns in its never-ending struggle for financial dominance and historical erasure. Part 32. Afton's Legacy versus Modern Fazbear Corporation. The 40-year narrative arc of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore demonstrates a profound and critical shift in the nature of the primary antagonist. While the early lore, encompassing the MCI and the Springlock disasters, was heavily driven by the personal, family-driven tragedies and serial killer motivations of William Afton, the modern corporate era shifts the focus, establishing the Fazbear Entertainment Corporation itself as the true persistent monster of the franchise. In the 1980s, the horror was largely the result of Afton's personal wickedness. He was the active serial killer, driven by psychological instability, jealousy of Henry Emily, and a fascination with life, death, and manipulation. The corporation was, at that time, a negligent backdrop, a morally corrupt entity that enabled Afton's crimes through its poor safety standards and dedication to cover-up. But Afton was the direct source of the violence and the subsequent haunting. His family's personal tragedies, including the deaths of his own children, drove the emotional core of the initial games. The struggle was clear. Henry and Michael Afton, attempting to defeat the individual evil of William. The modern law, beginning with the return of the Fazbear Entertainment LLC and the development of the VR platform, fundamentally repositions the conflict. William Afton's personal malice remains active, but it is now housed entirely in digital or mimic forms, Glitchtrap and the mimic entity. The key distinction is that these digital entities were not created by Afton himself. They were accidentally resurrected or unleashed by the corporation's own incompetence. The company scanned the contaminated circuit boards, allowing Glitchtrap to form. The company built the Pizzaplex on unstable ground, unleashing the mimic. The modern Fazbear Corporation is no longer just a negligent enabler. It has become the driving antagonist. It is a soulless, greedy entity that perpetuates the cycle of danger through its active, organized efforts to suppress the truth. The company's actions, the aggressive gaslighting through the VR games, the constant cover-ups of missing employees, the implementation of lethal infrastructure like the melt traps, are now the source of the persistent chaos. The corporation's relentless pursuit of profit and image control creates the environments, like the Pizzaplex, and the systems, like the AR channels, that allow the digital Afton and the mimic to continue their destructive work. The ultimate tragedy is that the struggle has shifted from one of personal, familial resolution to one of systemic, corporate impossibility. Defeating the individual William Afton proved possible, temporarily trapping him as Springtrap. Defeating the persistent, highly funded, legally insulated Fazbear Entertainment LLC appears impossible. The corporation is the ultimate cockroach of the corporate world, adapting to every scandal, erasing every problem, and surviving every catastrophe. The modern story is therefore a critique of corporate power, showing how greed and institutional negligence can become a more pervasive, terrifying monster than any single serial killer, ensuring that the legacy of Afton is only sustained because the corporate entity profits from his continuing digital existence. Part 33. How Fazbear Survives. Every scandal. The longevity of Fazbear Entertainment, a corporation that has survived multiple mass murders, debilitating lawsuits, severe public health scandals, financial collapses, and 2 total structural fires, is not a matter of luck, but a chilling testament to the power of brilliant legal maneuvering, financial obfuscation, and ruthless corporate strategy. The company's ability to persist through 4 decades of continuous tragedy is one of the most terrifying, consistent elements of the entire Five Nights at Freddy's narrative. The primary mechanism of survival lies in the aggressive use of the legal system. Since the MCI, or Missing Children Incident, in 1985, the company mastered the art of issuing ironclad non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, alongside financial settlements. These NDAs effectively purchased the silence of victims' families and former employees, preventing them from publicly testifying to the truth. This process ensured that every scandal, while damaging in the short term, never completely exposed the full, horrifying reality of the company's criminal activities and supernatural contamination, allowing the narrative to remain contained as urban legends. Financially, the company operates like a sophisticated organism designed for evasion. They utilize a system of shell companies and LLCs, a strategy that was perfected after the original bankruptcy. When one entity becomes too toxic, laden with debt, or threatened by lawsuits, it is simply allowed to fail, while the core assets, the intellectual property, the animatronic schematics, and the brand name are quickly transferred to a new, legally clean corporate shell. This tactic ensures that no single entity holds all the liability, protecting the core financial assets through offshore accounts and complex financial engineering, making the company impossible to kill through traditional legal or financial means. The corporate strategy also relies heavily on the manipulation of time and perception. Every few years, a rebranding effort is launched, utilizing the most advanced media technology available at that time. Whether it was the shiny plastic of the toys, the high-tech VR experience, or the massive Pizzaplex, this constant corporate reinvention is designed to exploit the public's short memory and the natural human tendency to view history as vague, unconfirmed legend. The aggressive PR machine turns historical fact into myth, and myth into profitable entertainment, using the company's notoriety not as a liability, but as a unique selling point for its horror products. Ultimately, Fazbear Entertainment survives every scandal because it is fundamentally amoral and non-human in its operations. It is a corporate machine that has learned to exploit the legal and financial structures of the modern world to achieve a twisted form of organizational immortality. It views human lives, legal regulations, and moral accountability merely as operating costs to be managed and minimized, ensuring that the machine itself rolls on, continuously capitalizing on the death, pain, and digital corruption that it actively fosters. Part 34. The ethical collapse of Fazbear Entertainment, the complete 40-year timeline, spanning from Henry Emily's pure, hopeful vision at Fredbear's family diner to the modern, secretive operations of the Fazbear Entertainment LLC, documents a total and terrifying ethical collapse. This is the company's true defining tragedy, the transformation from a promising children's restaurant into a multi-billion-dollar empire founded and sustained purely by systemic negligence, institutionalized denial, and the aggressive monetization of human trauma. The collapse began immediately with the partnership between Henry and William Afton. The very first ethical compromise was the approval of the springlock technology, a known lethal mechanism prioritized for its dual-use efficiency over the clear risk to employee safety. This established the fatal pattern: profit over people. This choice was quickly followed by the decision to cover up the early springlock accidents, ignoring the warning signs and setting the precedent for corporate denial, ensuring that the company was a knowing accessory to the dangers lurking within its own product. The darkest moment of the collapse was the reaction to the MCI, or missing children incident. The company's deployment of aggressive legal maneuvers, hush money, and NDAs to suppress the truth of the murders confirmed its identity as a morally bankrupt entity. The corporation's priority was not justice for the victims, but the protection of its brand equity, a chilling choice that effectively allowed the killer to disappear and the souls of the children to remain trapped and active, guaranteeing the continued haunting. The later stages of the ethical collapse were defined by systemic cruelty toward employees and customers. In the toy era, the company knowingly deployed faulty, aggressive technology that put night guards at extreme risk. During the final pizzeria run in 1993, they forced staff to work in an environment with confirmed health code violations and minimal safety protocols. In the modern era, the ethical collapse accelerated, marked by the creation of the VR propaganda to gaslight the public, the digital corruption of employees like Vanessa, and the implementation of lethal infrastructure like the melt traps within the Pizzaplex, systems designed for the untraceable disposal of human life. The final analysis reveals that the Fazbear Entertainment Corporation is not simply a business that encountered a crisis. It is an organizational structure that has entirely integrated malice into its operational DNA. It is a machine that prioritizes image, profit, and the continuous suppression of its history over all human concerns. The narrative of the company is a profound commentary on how corporate greed, when unchecked, can create monsters far more pervasive and enduring than any individual human killer, ensuring that the legacy of Afton is sustained not by magic, but by the ruthless organizational will to survive at any ethical cost. Part 35. The complete corporate timeline, from Fredbear to ruin. The final, comprehensive chronological wrap-up of the 5 Nights at Freddy's lore reveals a chilling, unbroken 40-plus year cycle of tragedy, paranormal activity, corporate negligence, and calculated cover-ups. The entire timeline, stretching from the hopeful opening of a small diner to the digital ruins of a massive mall, is defined by the absolute refusal of the past sins to remain buried, continuously emerging to destroy the next iteration of the corporate lie. The cycle begins with the Fredbear's family diner era in the early 1980s, driven by the pure invention of Henry and the dark engineering of William Afton, culminating quickly in the death of Charlotte Emily and the creation of the first possessed animatronic, the puppet. The subsequent foundation of Fazbear Entertainment, Inc. and the opening of the first full pizzeria set the stage for the catastrophic MCI in 1985, permanently binding 5 more souls to the main animatronic cast. This criminal event was immediately met with the first massive corporate response, a total denial, huge financial payouts, and aggressive rebranding efforts to survive the scandal. The cycle repeats with the high-tech failure of the toy era in 1987, where advanced technology was sabotaged and resulted in the undeniable public disaster of the Bite of '87. This legal and PR collapse forced the company into the final, desperate, low-budget attempt of the 1993 pizzeria, which ended in bankruptcy, the final shutdown, and the secret entombment of William Afton as Springtrap. The Fazbear name vanished, becoming nothing more than a dark urban legend. The modern corporate era, beginning in the 2020s, sees the cycle shift from the physical to the digital. The resurrection of the brand by the new Fazbear Entertainment LLC and the commissioning of the VR propaganda game accidentally resulted in the digital resurrection of Afton as Glitchtrap. This new, infectious entity quickly corrupted the company's systems and employees, leading to the construction of the colossal, legally deceptive Mega Pizzaplex. This physical monument to corporate hubris was ultimately destroyed by the internal chaos of Vanny's sabotage, the emerging threat of the Mimic, and the fact that it was built directly atop the spiritual and physical rot of the past. The final period, encompassing the Ruin incident and Help Wanted 2, confirms the permanence of this cycle. The company responds to the Pizzaplex collapse not with truth, but with the cynical, weather-damaged cover story, while simultaneously utilizing its next VR game to further normalize and fictionalize the continuous pattern of violence. The entire history is a terrifying loop. Every attempt by Fazbear Entertainment to create a clean, profitable future is inevitably undermined by the vengeful, uncontainable ghosts, technology, and legal failures of its past, ensuring that the story of the company remains one where the consequences of corporate malice and human evil persistently refuse to stay buried. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. Thank you.